Okay, hi everybody, and good morning to you. Good morning here from Finland. It's not exactly sunny Finland. And Tuija in the north has been fighting storms for 3 or 4 days. Anyway, glad to see some of you here. Glad to see all of you who have made it. And let's see. Yes, that's good. Okay. Now we're on program number 23, and 19 of them have been group programs. And this is the 24th of July at 5 a.m. GMT. And this is a treatise on cosmic fire in depth. Well, how deep can we go? That's always the big question. We came upon footnote number 6. And this is a rendition of the Brahmanical calendar, which Blavatsky says is accurate. Others who study with Sri Yukteswar, who was the teacher of Yogananda, say that it's greatly expanded more than it should be, and that the periods are much smaller, but who knows, maybe the periods they're talking about can actually fit within these. I think before looking at these figures, and we have to assume that they're here for a reason and that the Tibetan included them for a reason, before looking at them, we should just have the slightest meditation. And by the way, I just want to say hi to those of you who have joined us, and Michael, Stacy helping here on the logistics, and Annette and Catherine and Joe, one of our communications team, doing a lot of work along the same line. And Miro, hi. And let's see here, a little more. Aristo, hi. And Zenaidi. And if I've forgotten anybody, my apologies. Anna, yeah. It's not easy to move the slider up and down on this. It's much easier when dealing with GoToMeeting. But in any case, welcome. It is pretty much the middle of the night in the United States, but in Australia and New Zealand, a fairly decent time. So people can see this later or listen to it later if they want to review. Just think about what a year of your life may be, how you experience a year. This is one, Earth year of revolution of the Earth around our sun. It's our particular unit of measure. Now, think about the impression of a decade. Think back 10 years to the present moment. And think of how you were and what you were doing and what the passing of that a decade feels like to you. Now think of a Saturn cycle, which is about 29 years. And most people these days probably would have 2 complete Saturn cycles in their incarnation. And some maybe living to the age of 87 or slightly about 87 would have 3. How was it then in your life almost 30 years ago? And really that gives you a sense of your entire incarnation up to this point. Maybe you haven't completed 2 Saturn cycles yet, but okay. Even if you haven't completed 2 Saturn cycles, you get the sense of the incarnation and maybe some intimations of where you were in your last life. There's no way to standardize a period between lives. At our stage of development, the in-between periods seem to be rather longer certainly than they were when we had very little content of a mental kind to deal with long ago. But when the 6th petal is open, this is what I've been able to gather, it may be possible to return quickly. And that's really between you and your master and you and the solar angel. There's no way to generalize about that right now. But really, we've had hundreds of incarnations. And all of us, I think I can probably safely say that, unless we happen to be one of those unusual Vulcanian, or perhaps, well, Vulcanian ego. There are a few kinds of egos with some petals unfolded that have entered during the Aryan age, but otherwise, we have all been around at least since Atlantis began, maybe some 12 million years ago. 12 million, 12 with 6 zeros, okay? Maybe some thousands of incarnations. And maybe some in this group incarnated or individualized in Middle Lemuria, which would be like 21 with 6 zeros after it, 21 million years ago. That would be even more lives than the Atlantean incarnators. Probably the Atlantean incarnators are not among our group. In other words, those who individualized at that time. But maybe quite a number of us may have individualized on the moon chain, and that would take us back into 9 zeros. We can't say how long ago that would have been, but maybe the idea of billions of years, maybe not too many billions, but some billions of years ago. And DK gives some figures about when individualization on the moon chain would have occurred. The numbers 3 and 5 are prominent. And maybe for some few, individualization in the previous major solar system, that takes us into the realm of 12 zeros. How long is it between solar systems? Right now we're having the second major solar system, and following upon the first major solar system. We don't have to worry about the earlier 3, but there were incarnations of our solar logos corresponding to what we call our physical instinctual polarization, our astral polarization, and our lower mental polarization. So that would have been the very longest. See, all of this is just to get a little bit of a scale, a feeling scale of time. Because in one way, in the deepest philosophical sense, time doesn't exist. There is no movement, there is no division, there's only an eternal now of suchness which underlies the field of the Maha Maya. And the Maha Maya is a cyclic universe. That's even a universe, you know. There are appearances and disappearances of much lesser bodies while the universe persists. So it's just a feeling of how long is long, how short is short. Maybe when you look back on your life, I don't know, maybe it feels long, maybe it feels short. It's a subjective or subtle sense of things. Because if these figures are going to mean anything to us except for interesting figures, maybe we should have a bit of a felt sense. I mean, just a few incarnations ago, it was medieval times, and it seems like a long time ago, doesn't it? But that's still within the range of one little age of 2,160 years. The age of Pisces, and how many incarnations have taken place there. We don't readily remember these things, maybe a hint here or there. But that's just 2,160. That's the term we're given, which interestingly is exactly 1/2 of 432, which is the prevailing term here in this chronology. So those equinoctial ages that human consciousness makes such a big deal over are about 1/2 of the figure that we use frequently here. So anyway, in this footnote number 6, he says the number of sidereal years, that's one, you know, complete revolution of the Earth, but not taking into consideration the solar factor, which demands a bit more of the revolution, or rotation rather. No, maybe revolution is correct. The number of sidereal years embraced in the foregoing different periods are as follows. So here's one mortal year. Now you can see that these figures are rounded off. We're not dealing with the 365 and a quarter. We're just dealing with the usual divisions of the circle. So 360 days make 1 year, you know. Now comes the Indian Yuga setup. So you just think, you know, you've been incarnating on Earth through so much of this, what we're going to talk about now. The Krita Yuga is the golden age, but the figure that we're talking about, it's an upside down tetractys. The tetractys that we usually deal with has 4 points on the bottom, 3 above it interspersed, 2 above that and 1 above that. That's the 10. Knocking down, you know, if you've ever gone bowling, maybe in different countries bowling is practiced differently. I know in the United States we have the tetractys pins, but we're faced with the kingpin. And we even have kind of a colloquial saying about being the kingpin, number 1 on top of the whole structure. But this is upside down in a way. So the Krita Yuga is 4 times the base figure of 432,000. Notice 432 is that ongoing figure related to the 216 of the equinoctial age. And not to say that any of these figures are anything but, let's say, kind of approximate. DK is specific in saying that I haven't given you the exact figures, but these are approximations. So we're faced with the 4 points first, and then in the Treta Yuga, it looks like the number 3, Treta, triad, we're faced with 3 points, which is 3 times the 432. And then we're faced with 2 points, the Dwapara Yuga, which contains 864,000 years. And finally, the Kali Yuga, which is the shortest measure, we might say, almost thank goodness, because it's considered to be an age of the darkness of consciousness. But even though Kali has all those heads around her belt, you know, the dark goddess, her purpose is good because she eliminates illusion and she cuts the head off of illusion, you might say. So here are 10 points. Now, I was just talking with Michael, and he was saying that, you know, Blavatsky says something about when the Kali Yuga ends, toward the end of the very end of the 19th century. However, there are different ways of measuring this. The students of Sri Yukteswar, who was Yogananda's teacher, speculated upon these big cycles, and they said, well, Blavatsky's cycles are way too big. And really, let's get everything down to size, which is like measuring off of what's called a Platonic year. And if I was to, I've got to be careful here. Now let's see. Yeah, you see that. And I wonder if I can get my, I've been looking for my calculator. I do have a calculator here.
Are you wanting to change your shared screen?
I've got it now. Okay. Yeah, so the calculator should be showing up.
And yes, it is.
And a Platonic year, one way of looking at a Platonic year is take that figure 2160, which is the duration of an equinoctial cycle, meaning like an age, our normal age of Pisces, our normal age of Aquarius, and multiply it by 12. And then we have 25,920 years. It's closer to 26,000 really. So it's 25,920. I'm going to put this in here in this way. See, basically, we want to come up with a feeling for time. That's why we're doing this, okay? So I just want to say that 25,920 is one measure of a Platonic year. And a Platonic year, I don't have the diagram, but basically the Earth is like a top and it spins at an angle of 23 degrees and a little more. And that spinning around is, it's not rotation, it's not revolution around the sun, it's not even a bowing back and forth, which I think is called nutation. It's a measure of gyration. So derived through gyration. Sorry. That's a long time, and DK actually rounds it off, and I don't know why, but he rounds it off to 25,000 years, even though it's another 920. Was the teacher David Rice Davis? Anyway, some of the students of Yukteswar said, well, we're really basing everything upon the Great Platonic Year. So 12 ages. We've just finished with the age of Pisces in 100 years from now, and then another 2,160, the age of Aquarius, another 2,160, the age of Capricorn. 12 of those make a complete Platonic year, and maybe, you could begin at some point measuring from 0 degrees of Aries. We talked about that a little bit, about how all the planets will line up, especially the Vedic astrology planets, in 0 degrees of Lanka, or 0 degrees of Aries. And a really big cycle is from one lineup of those intra-Saturnian planets, including Saturn, and then back to the same lineup many, many Earth years later. So some people think, this is my way of saying that some people think that these huge figures are too expanded, and we should crush everything down more in relation to the Platonic year. Now, you can even say, there are overlap periods here, and they usually are periods of 5,000 years, 500 years, 5 years, and even 5 days. The number 5, see, it's not like something begins ends, and then the other thing begins exactly at that point. There's just this overlapping, and probably the 5,000 year overlap is having to do with a Platonic year, and this rather large figure, 25,920. I mean, we still are being approximate, so let's realize that, but at least it gives us an idea of scope. And when we're dealing with normal equinoctial ages, we have 500-year overlap. And so, are we reaching the end of that 500 years? Maybe, because in a way it all began with Sir Francis Bacon with his tremendously Aquarian chart, and he was the few drops which presaged the monsoon. The Aquarian monsoon was coming, and he supposedly died in, 1616 or something like that? Well, think of it. Go back 500 years, or ahead 500 years from 1616, and that's 2116, and we're told in a letter that DK wrote to Roberto Assagioli that 2117 is the beginning of the Aquarian age. So maybe that overlap, maybe we're still in kind of the overlap period, the last little bit of the 500 years. So, I'm just trying to tie that system of equinoctial ages in with this Yuga system. Well, anyway, what we have is the figures from Madame Blavatsky, who says they are trustworthy. And maybe, somewhere as we're reading the footnote, we'll see that. So we have 10 periods of 432,000 years. Now, just stop for a minute. And, I would say, think back 432,000 years. Where are we? Well, we're still in the Aryan age, aren't we? Because the Aryan age is the fifth root race age. The Aryan root race is said to have begun about 1 million years ago. Maybe this is before 2 of the floods. One of the things you get from reading The Secret Doctrine is that there just wasn't one flood, there were more. And there was a flood maybe around 11,000 BC, something like that, where an island called Poseidonus, right there is the god with the trident, sank. This is maybe one of the last sinkings of Atlantis, that part of Atlantis which did sink, because America never sunk, apparently. And the United States, he tells us, is the center of the old Atlantean continent, which is really a different point of view, isn't it? Because we usually have that idea, oh, Atlantis sank under the waves, well, not all of it. And the psychism and kind of a Neptunian astral quality of the United States is all a inheritance from Atlantean days. So maybe this figure 432,000 takes us back before the 2 most recent floods. Maybe one was, I think Philip Lindsay is the person to go to here with his hidden history of humanity. What a great job he did. But 1 million years is just 2 of those Kali Yugas. That's 864,000 years, or maybe a Treta Yuga ago. In other words, three times 432,000 would take us to approximately 1 million year old fifth root race. But then during Atlantis, already signs of the coming fifth root race began to emerge during the fifth subrace of the Atlantean root race. So, from the time the number 5 appears, already you are anticipating the next age, which would have been now the Aryan root race age. And one of the interesting things, obviously we're talking about here what we will learn when we are masters. We will have the knowledge that is given to us on the third subplane of the atmic plane, where the siddhi or power that will be conferred upon us is called all knowledge. Well, it can't be all universal knowledge, obviously, but it's got to be a whole lot of knowledge concerning planetary cycles. So, maybe how long does a Maha Yuga last? It's 10 of these 432,000 year periods. And if you go here, he's to the next statement that he has, the total of said 4 yugas together, which is like 10 Kali yugas, all wrapped up into our tetracties, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, or upside down, is 4,320,000 years, and that's a Maha Yuga. Well, we can say that even the preparation for the fifth root race has just about lasted 1 Maha Yuga. This will take us back to Atlantean times, some 4 million years ago, and it may take us back to the time of approximately the Great War in Atlantis, which I think probably occurred, we'll have to confirm with Philip, it probably occurred in the 4th sub-race of the 4th root race. And what began to happen there is that humanity was making a lot of progress in the possibility of initiation, and the Black Lodge just decided we have to oppose this. So one simple Maha Yuga, which is really 4 times what the Aryan race is considered to be, because we're given an approximation. The Aryan root race has been with us for approximately 1 million years. 4 times that is 1 Maha Yuga. And it takes us back only to the preparatory period for the Aryan root race. Now it starts to get interesting in terms of time, It would be just marvelous to be able to know what the masters know about this. And, we'll have to prove that we are trustworthy in these matters before anything like the real figures will be given to us. These approximations are probably not very far off, but they may not be sufficient for us to determine exactly when a new cycle is breaking in. But the masters can work with the divine plan because they know exactly when a new cycle is breaking in. Now, for instance, it is said that we are in the Kali Yuga, a Kali Yuga now. And well, just, think 427,000 years ahead. Why do I say that? Because the story goes that the most recent Kali Yuga began at the death of Krishna. And the death of Krishna was something like 3002 BC or 3102, something like that. It was 5,000 years ago. Now, basically, we're probably talking about the fourth initiation of Lord Maitreya, the Christ, some 5,000 years ago. And that's when it is said that our most recent Kali Yuga over here began. Now, that's only 5,000 years off of Kali Yuga, if these figures are accurate. And so we'll be in a kind of Kali Yuga, if these figures are accurate, for another 427,000 years. This is relatively a dark age. And yet in the Agni Yoga teaching, maybe in the Yuktaswar teaching, we hear about a new golden age beginning. But these must be, sort of sub-cycles and sub-sub-cycles within some kind of greater period that lasts several hundreds of thousands of years. So when you look at a complete Maha Yuga, it's 4,320,000 years, and it takes us back, if we want landmarks, probably to a period in mid-Atlantis when this war was going to be fought because humanity was making too much progress. Now, it goes further. As I say, I'm not an expert in all these figures. I mean, you can understand that this is a very specialized study, but I just want to get the feel for it. And I think that's what you should do too. I'm not suggesting that you have to be the mathematical type and pore over every little figure here, but it's just a feeling of the time context in which you are living your lives. 71 such Maha Yugas form the period of the reign of one Manu. Now, this is not an ordinary Manu, obviously. The kinds of Manus that really the Maha Chohan's duration in office is longer than the Manus, and I remember the figure is too long, but this particular figure is close to what one round is, a round through a chain. Now, the problem is there may be a formula. There may be a formula here of what I would call a tightening spiral. So it's not that every round necessarily lasts 306 approximately millions of years. The later rounds may tighten around a point and last less long. Maybe this is an average figure, but I am remembering that this figure can be connected with the idea of a round, not a big scheme round where you're going through all the chains, as I tried to show that before. Let me just try to differentiate here for a moment. That would be a solar systemic round. Here, let's say, is the Earth scheme. So the kind of round we're talking about here would be like 7 times around the Earth chain. And that would be called a chain round. And probably, something similar happens with all chains. And maybe even to a degree simultaneously. That's the other interesting factor. And maybe the later rounds take place faster than the earlier rounds, because that seems to be the way things are, that when you're dealing with the third aspect of divinity, it takes longer. less long with the second aspect, and much shorter with the first aspect. But there is another kind of round that I call a scheme round, which goes through chains as if they were globes. Now, in a chain round, it's 7 times through these 7 globes. Obviously, this is a very kind of rounded off, approximate process because there are inner invisible globes, which we talk about as being part of the inner round. And all that has to do with Mercury and its relationship to our Earth and so forth. But at least we have 7 here. And a round is going to go through 7 globes. Just the way a scheme round is going to go through 7 chains. Now, we don't know exactly how it works and when the timing of one overlaps with the timing of the one before it and so forth. It's not necessarily, here's a unit, here's a unit, here's a unit. There are always these overlaps. And what I've tried to explain also is that from the time you're born, you have all your 7 chakras, even though they are not all equally activated at the same time. So it's not like we have to build up the next chakra and then the next chakra appears. You couldn't live. You have to have all your chakras to live. And the same thing for the Earth scheme. In my view, you have to have all the chains, which are chakras, in order for the Earth being to live through this Earth scheme, the planetary logos living through the Earth scheme. But the time of activation changes. And then you get into all the intricacies of what happens in an etheric body. How the triangles are differently activated depending on the monadic ray of the entity we're talking about. But the thing to come away with is just that there are smaller rounds, to which that figure 306 million, I think, relates. And there are the bigger, and those are called chain rounds. And then there's the bigger scheme round. And that, maybe 7 of those equal the duration of a planetary scheme. And they probably all are taking place at different speeds, if I may say. Now, it just gives you an idea, thinking about this gives you an idea about how little we know about technical occultism and the timing of it. But if you just make the analogy that this is just like your chakra system, and maybe you know something about your chakra system, you can extrapolate to the system of chain rounds and bigger scheme rounds. I think Venus is quite advanced. It certainly has different cycles than Earth does. And I think it's pretty well finished its job. And the question is that job finished with respect to the present chain round? Somewhere in Cosmic Fire, it's going to deal with that. Or has Venus had 5 scheme rounds in which it has completed the process that would normally take 7? So the figures in terms of Earth years, and remember, you can always translate these things into different kinds of years, because every planet has its own kind of year, which could be used as the basis of measure. Let's just say it takes Mars around 2 times it takes twice as long for Mars to go around the sun as it does for the Earth, roughly. So the Mars year would not be measured in terms of Earth years, it would be measured in terms of its own year, and all the cycles would change accordingly. I hope that makes a little bit of sense and maybe induces in us a sense of humility about what has to be learned. So for some reason, he uses the word number 71, and he multiplies the figure 4320000 by 71. I'm going to try that. 4320000, and you know what I'll do there is just make that come up, and another 0 times 71, and there it is. Whoops, I think I went too far. Oh, maybe not far enough. In other words, what it really needs is, let's see, well, I'm just going to accept what DK says. Aha, right. I get it. One more. Now I've got it. 4,320,000 is 1 Maha Yuga times 71 equals 306,720,000 years. Okay. And that's, that's exactly the figure we have here. Now, the kind of Manus we're talking about, I'll have to check into this, but there are root Manus and seed Manus. And the root Manus start the process of the development of one of these long periods of a Maha Yuga. And the seed Manu collects in itself all of the results of that cycle and then transfers the seed to the next root Manu. Now, maybe we really are talking about chain rounds, Manus of chain rounds. When we're talking about these kind of human Manus, the figures are not so big. I could go on a hunt, and maybe someone could. What is the reign of the present Manu that we have? Vevasvata Manu, and let's see if that figure comes out anything like this 306 million year figure. This is the period of the reign of 1 Manu. So for every round of the chain kind, the smaller round, like we have Earth chain, there's going to be 1 Manu, and it's going to comprise 71 Maha Yugas. Now we go on and we multiply this figure by 14. The reign of 14 Manus, which seems right because you need a root Manu and a seed Manu for each cycle. And if there are 7 cycles, then root and seed is 2 times 7 is 14. So the reign of 14 Manus embraces the duration of 994 Maha Yugas. And we've already seen what a tremendous period of time. We've already seen what a tremendous period of time a Maha Yuga is anyway. A Maha Yuga is 4 million something years. So we need 994 of these to deal with the 14 Manus which oversee the development of a planetary chain. not necessarily an entire scheme round. That still has to be worked out because there's a lot of obscurity around scheme rounds. The kind of rounds that Blavatsky dealt with and early theosophy were chain rounds, and they were smaller. You know, and I showed you the picture of the Earth with its 7 exoteric chains, and you know, when you complete a cycle there of 7 for a chain, that's 7 chain rounds, but it doesn't tell you about the big scheme rounds. Now, I have the feeling that since Earth is sort of halfway through its development, and so is the solar logos, and Venus is just finished in 5, that in terms of the big rounds, which go from, they go from chain to chain to chain as if the chains were globes, that we're in the middle of a fourth one somehow. And I don't think we're going to complete our evolution like Venus did in 5. So anyway, 14 Manus, and I think, you know, what has to be checked here, if I can do this, check, are we speaking of chain rounds or scheme rounds? Much longer. A scheme round is much longer. We don't know the exact figures. Remember that scientists may estimate that the duration of Earth is 4 billion years or something, but they're just speaking physically. There are all of these inner aspects of the Earth being, and the developmental cycles concerning these inner aspects are completely esoteric figures. So things are likely to last a whole lot longer than we think when we deal with internal figures. Now, the word here is sandhies, sandhies. Add sandhies, that is the interval between the reign of each Manu, which amounts to 6 Maha Yugas, or 25,920 years. Now look at that figure. Doesn't that figure look interesting? Because we just went over it. Those are the same numbers plus 3 ciphers, 000, that are found in a great Platonic year. Now, you know, try to follow what I say here. A great Platonic year consisting of 12 equinoctial ages is 12 times 2160. Those are the figures we get. And once I derived 2160, it's not hard to derive that figure. But I didn't do it right now, and I don't want to take the time, but let's just say 2160 is how long a normal age of Pisces, age of Aquarius, age of Capricorn, whatever, lasts. Now, if you put 12 of those together, you get a great Platonic year. That great Platonic year is 25,920 years. And now look at this figure, 25,920,000 years. 6 Maha Yugas, which is the period between Manus. The period between the reign of each Manu, and maybe what we're talking about is from the seed Manu, from the seed Manu to the initial Manu that starts the process going. There's a Manu at the beginning, a Manu at the end, and between the culminating Manu and the next root Manu, let's see, we may have this kind of figure. of a Maha Yuga. You know, you can keep this stuff could keep you up at night, right? So it is being said, sorry, that the interval between a seed Manu, maybe I should capitalize, and a root Manu is 1 Maha Yuga. So then we add it all together and we come up with 1,000, don't we? 994 plus 6 is 1,000, and immediately you start to think about the 1,000-petaled lotus, and you begin to think about the Pleiades and how many hundreds of stars now into the high 800s, I think, have been discovered. And maybe, you know, the Pleiades is really the 1,000-petaled lotus. There's that figure again of the one about whom naught may be said, in which we live. See, all this stuff ties together, obviously. Now, we're not masters, and we don't have all knowledge of the planetary cycles, not even of our little Earth cycles, let alone our chain cycles and the scheme cycles. We don't have that. But we have indications. So the total of these reigns of Manus, it seems like he's almost counting a root Manu and a seed Manu as one. And I'm going to just say, you know, is he counting a root Manu and a seed Manu as one Manu manifestation? Is he doing that? Maybe. The total of these reigns of the Manus, 14 of them, which are really like 7 in a way, because if you're dealing with a globe, there's a root Manu and a seed Manu for a globe. There's a root Manu and a seed Manu of a much greater kind for a round. And I wouldn't be surprised, and I don't think it's being mentioned, a kind of a root Manu and a seed Manu for each of the 7 scheme rounds. See, you know, on a little globe, we have kind of an analogy to the Manus, maybe in the root races. And maybe there's the director of a root race that starts it going, and then one who gathers all the seeds into itself, and then an interval. You can understand what kind of mentality would be needed to get a hold of all this, but, you know, given that we have the kind of computing power we do now, we could get something reasonable out of it. So always root and seed, and the root and seed are all part of one sphere of activity. There's kind of a root and seed of root races, and Philip deals with this, you know, like Methuselah lived 900 years. Well, okay, who was Methuselah? Not a man. Methuselah was the name of some kind of root race or aspect of a root race. So it's a fractal-like thing where the lesser cycles resemble, but in less detail, the greater cycles. So there's a root and seed Manu for a chain round, and there's each one, and there's a root and seed Manu for a scheme round, each one. All these different Manus. You start something going, it's like Aries, Pisces, Alpha and Omega. The root Manu is like Aries, the seed Manu gathers it all in, and you've heard it said in our esoteric astrology book, Pisces takes from all the signs. So from Aries to Pisces, Alpha, Omega, and we have these various kinds of beings that set things going and gather things up, transfer what's gathered up during a certain period, and then a new Manu takes over, sets things going, progress is made, gathers everything up, and so forth. So we have the word, we have 1,000. 14 Manus is 1,000 Maha Yugas, which constitute, here we go, a Kalpa. Constitute a Kalpa, or one day of Brahma. And, you know, let's just say that there are 360 days of Brahma in a great Brahmic year. But that's not an occult century, not yet. That's just a year. How long does Brahma live? All right. So one Kalpa, or one day of Brahma, is 4,320,000,000 years. Now I know, you know, in different countries we use words like billion, milliard for billion, you know. I'm just using what I know, sort of the American way, which is million is 6 zeros, billion is 9 zeros, trillion is 12 zeros, and on it goes, measuring big numbers. Anyway, most of what I've written here in blue, I have been discussing. So, what have I said here? The 360 times 1,000 Maha Yugas equals, and 360,000 equal 360,000 times 2, or 720,000 Maha Yugas in 1 year of Brahma. And how long do you live? Let's say archetypally you live 100 years. So if a year of Brahma is 720,000 days, let's see, or maybe Earth years, I'll have to consider this. Anyway, I came up with what would be called Brahma living 100 years. We have 72 million Maha Yugas in an occult century. But I have to recheck my figures, okay? But now I'll just stick with the Tibetan and with Blavatsky. Remember, the Tibetan is quoting Blavatsky here. He's basically saying this is okay. Otherwise, he's giving us misinformation. So anyway, 1 day of Brahma is equal to 4,320,000 years. Now, you know, now think back that 4 million years ago, knock off 3 zeros, the Great War in Atlantis took place, roughly. And now think that you did not even come to this planet, even if you were from the moon chain, until maybe 8 or 9 million years ago, because it was in the third subrace of the Atlantean root race that moon chain humanity was transferred over. So early Atlantean days were 12 million years ago, he says. And then there was a transfer from the moon chain under the number 3. And there were a lot of third-ray monads on the moon chain, or their subsidiaries 4, 5, 6, 7, because 3 includes 4, 5, 6, 7. So those third-ray monads, which could have been 4th subdivision, 5th subdivision, 6th subdivision, 7th subdivision, were transferred over in the third root race, third subrace of the Atlantean root race. You know, I'm making a guess, like maybe, 8 million years ago. And yet one little day of Brahma is 4 billion years ago, which is usually considered about the duration of the Earth itself, physically, albeit. Now, this gets interesting because you have to double the time. One day of Brahma is equal to 4,320,000 years. No, 4,320,000,000 years. And here comes the Tibetan saying, as Brahma's night is of equal duration, one day and night of Brahma will contain 8,640,000,000 years. This is 24 hours of Brahma into the billions. 24 hours of Brahma is already longer than any scientist gives the Earth credit for having existed. Somehow we get the figure 4 billion, 5 billion, but remember they're just talking about physicality. Now we stay away from figures like 365 because they have to do not so much with archetypes as they do with actualities. But what do? We take that figure of 24 hours of Brahma and we say, well, what's a year of Brahma then? A year of Brahma is 360 such 24-hour days. So we take 360 of such days and nights, the 24-hour period, and we make 1 year of Brahma by multiplying the figure here, 8,640,000,000 years by 360. And what do we get? We get a year of Brahma. It's a stupendous figure. Brahma, by the way, is, probably pretty much the duration of a solar logos. Now what do we have? 3,110,400,000,000 years equals 1 year of Brahma. Just 1 year. Now Brahma is not living just 1 year. Brahma, our solar logos here, both outer and inner, because if you don't count the inner, it's hopeless to use these figures. Now we want to say, how many years does Brahma live? And the archetype is 100 years. The old saying in humanity, oh, if I live to be 100. Everyone wants to live to be 100 years old, and it's a big deal. I only know one person in person that lived to be 100, and she was the head of Meditation Mount. And, she had that very strong Cancerian hang in there energy. Her name was Frances Adams Moore. She was a venerable occultist and friend of Roberto Basaggioli. She lived to be, I think, 101. She made the century. Well, if Brahma makes the century, we have to multiply this 3 trillion figure by 100. And now we get the grand entirety. And this grand entirety is a figure that you will recognize. I'm going to make it a big grand entirety. I don't know if I can. Well, it's not so neat, but there it is. I'll put it in red. Okay. That's how long, according to the Brahmanic chronology, that a century of Brahma, a ripe old age for Brahma, our solar system, our solar logos, lives 311 trillion 40 billion years. Now that, we think a century is a long time on the human scale, but we're like little fireflies, zip, gone, gone. Just like we look at a tiny little atomic particle and you need specially sensitive machines because they only endure nanoseconds. These particles, their endurance is of such a short scale that you need a way of measuring that. Well, the life of man is like that atomic, subatomic particle. This is an occult century. It's called a mahakalpa. 100 years of Brahma, a mahakalpa. And, and there are other things to do, and I've started to do them, and maybe next time I'll go over them. That 31,104,000 is the number of seconds in an Earth year. Times 100, it brings us, and this is interesting, the figure is similar. It brings us to 3,110,400,000 seconds in a century of our years. Now, I can't remember whether I'm using 360. I hope so. I hope I'm not using 365 here. It's been a while since I've looked over this. 5 zeros are missing from the foregoing figure when comparing it to the number of years in an occult century. Therefore, 3,110,400,000 times 100,000, which gives you your 5 zeros, equals, and there's your figure, 311,040,000,000,000. So in 100,000 centuries, I'm going to check all of this over. I don't want to give you the wrong figures because I know that you're going to rush out and use them immediately, right? So in 100,000 centuries, or 10 million years, there are the same number of seconds as there are years in an occult century, or mahakalpa. See, you can pretty much start with, seconds of the day, hours, how long a day lasts. The number 24 is going to show up all the time. It's a Shambhala number. It is, the number of Shambhala, along with 6. And here's the sneaky Tibetan giving us all this in footnote number 6, which is somehow the number that is so germane to the derivation of all these figures. Okay, now just one more thing is going to be said, and then I'll stop this torture. because there's more coming. I've tried to figure out how many years in a complete universe. And you can wheel me off or send the men with the big butterfly nets after me after we discuss that one. But that these figures, this is the justification, that these figures are not fanciful, but are founded upon astronomical facts, has been demonstrated by Mr. Davis, whoever that is, in an essay on Asiatic researches. And this received further corroboration from the geological investigations and calculations made by Dr. Hunt, formerly president of the Anthropological Society, and also in some respects from the researches of Professor Huxley. Now, I'll use this next paragraph as a segue into next week's discussion. And by the way, you can breathe a sigh of relief because, we're pretty much through footnote number 6. Great as the period of the mahakalpa seems to be, well, that's why I had to start meditating and say, well, how long does the century seem to you? Well, how long does the life seem to you? How long does an equinoctial age like a Pisces with X number of incarnations, how long does that seem to you? Because it's a tiny drop in the bucket when you have basically 3 zeros in such a figure compared to 12 zeros when we're dealing with trillions. So, our consciousness is completely unsuited to gauging these kinds of time spans. And yet, in another way, I think I can prove that they never took place at all anyway, and that each one of them is infinitesimal in duration. That's a whole nother deal, but sometime I'll try to bridge from the figures into the philosophy. But I'm going to end on this paragraph. Great as the period of a mahakalpa seems to be, we are assured that thousands and thousands, what's 1,000,000? It's 100,000, isn't it? Or is it 1,000,000? It's 1,000,000. Thousands and thousands of millions, so of such mahakalpas have passed, and as many more are yet to come in our particular universe, I suppose. And we're supposed to look at the Puranas here and certain chapters and verses. And this, in plain language, according to Blavatsky, means that the time past is infinite and the time to come is equally infinite, and you're just caught in linearity anyway. And once we prove that there are no such things as intervals, we're into an eternal now in which all of these huge figures only seem to be occurring, but are not really occurring at all. Okay. Now, when I consider these things, I just have to kind of drop my jaw and say I'm a tiny human being at the moment. And we're talking about time spans so great that Blavatsky says we should talk about infinite time. Of course, technically that's not true, but okay, so this is the end of program 23. And it's 2319, and our day today is 25. And we're on page, what page are we on, Michael? Probably the same page? It's a footnote, so it's hard to say. 38, 39, right?
I think it's 39.
Uh-huh. Wow, what progress, huh? And now we're going to look a little more at, not this moment, at astonishing figures, which give us the sense of being around forever. So from, okay, I'm sorry. Group program, what did we just end? 23? I think so. And this is, and today is the 24th of July. And then we would go to what? We would go to 24th. We'd go to the 31st. We'd start there. 31st of July, and our programs would be 2419. Those figures are so close it gets confusing. And then that's going to be a PM deal. And here we are in AM. So that ought to be enough to give us an anchor. Now, basically, when it comes to all these things, the desirable state of mind at first is a sense of awe. Okay, and I just want to say that. A sense of awe is desirable in this context. Just think of the incredibly short time scale of those things about which we expend great emotional energy. We get all worked up about, let's say, an election, about a president's term. We get worked up about what's happening to the fate of a nation, and so forth. Tiny figures compared to these figures. And it's possible philosophically to even deal with these figures and make them into a blip, just a blip, when compared to infinitude. So for myself, I say, wow, you know, I try to hold in my mind this idea that a tiny little solar system like ours, which is just a crystal compared to other larger systems in the universe, is according to this chronology lasting 311 trillion 40 billion years approximately, and that an arhat, now a master, Madame Blavatsky, and says that these figures are not fanciful, but are based upon, you know, astronomical facts. You know, rotation, revolution, nutation, gyration, those kinds of, the kind of dance that planets do. And then who knows what kind of rotation, revolution, nutation, gyration our sun is doing. And even, you know, galaxies doing things, moving with respect to themselves and with respect to still higher centers. So it begins to put things in proportion, and it begins to induce a sense of humility in which, you know, you begin to understand why so many of those Buddhas are laughing Buddhas. You know, they just somehow, they realize something about the seriousness and non-seriousness of everything. And they have a different attitude than those who have such a small perspective like we do. They just have expanded tremendously, and they know that their expansion is a drop in the bucket. It's just like a nothing expansion. What does a solar logos perceive? What does a galactic logos perceive? Okay. So, you know, I'm kind of asking your forgiveness for indulging in this subject. And, you know, it's true I didn't have all my ducks lined up exactly here. But I did want to draw the parallel between the number of seconds in a century and the number of years in an occult century. I'll review this and I'll try to pull out the main points. The idea is that we're involved in just a tremendous system of relationships, and that the whole story is not that we are like a little firefly or a subatomic particle. The real we is the whole thing. There's no way that you can prevent any being from being the entirety of all beings. And that is a philosophical point. In other words, that you, in your essential identity, are limitless. Now, you know, invitation to megalomania, you know, the person thinks they're limitless, but I call it an invitation to humility, to an adjusted sense of right proportion. So we realize that we are simultaneously utmost tiny and all of the tininess that can be found in the whole. All right. So now I'll turn it over to you, and, you know, just whatever impressions you have about all this or questions that you have. I mean, if you're going to ask the absolute technical questions, I don't know if I can, you know, really answer anything there. You would have to be, you know, a scholar of the supreme fifth ray type and make a vast study of these figures to be able to answer reasonably. And then, even then, you would know, if you're a human being, that the real figures are being withheld from you as the secrets of initiation, and that you don't have all knowledge, you're not a master, and you're not functioning on the third subplane of the atmic plane of the cosmic physical plane. And at the very beginning of cyclic knowledge, we'd have to at least function there to get, you know, some kind of rounded out picture of all of this. Meanwhile, we know just a few things about cycles, and we try to time ourselves accordingly using astrology and rheology and just the little bit that we do know. Okay, has everybody left yet?
I would not say that everyone has left yet, but this footnote is taken from pages 69 and 70 in volume 2 of The Secret Doctrine. And there's a nice section in the first volume of The Secret Doctrine, beginning on page 368, section 7, The Days and Nights of Brahma.
Okay, so this is in the Secret Doctrine. Of course, now we have to talk about what version. Is it version 3? I mean, is it?
It's volume 2. It's volume 2.
Because the original out of which so much of this is taken is the 3-volume set.
Yeah.
So volume 2. So in the Secret Doctrine, volume 2, page 60.
69 and 70.
This info can also be found.
And
some of it, all of it.
The entire chart is on 69 and 70.
In other words, we have imported this chart in its entirety is an import from the Secret Doctrine.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, so this is an import. Okay. And an important import. Okay, and the other one was what, Michael?
The other one was in volume 1 of The Secret Doctrine.
In the three volume set?
Yes, volume 1.
Huh?
And the section is titled The Days and Nights of Brahma.
How does it compare? Yeah.
It goes into, it's the name given to the periods called Manvantara and Pralaya, one referring to the active periods of the universe, the other to its times of relative and complete rest, according to whether they occur at the end of a day or an age, a life of Brahma. These
Okay,
periods,
maybe. Oh, okay. Maybe you can, get that. We're not going to have that version. Maybe there's a way that you can. Is it a long one? Because it would be nice to have those.
This is pages long. This is for
Okay.
people to pull out their books of the secret doctrine, and it's like an assignment for next week, right?
Right. Yeah, that's it. Next life. Okay. But can it be found in the usual 2-volume set?
It can be found. I got my editions online, and they're electronic in PDF format.
Okay, is that the 3-volume set?
Yes.
Online. If you can send a link for that to
Uh,
everybody.
yeah, I don't know what the link is anymore. I retrieved them years ago.
Oh, okay. And just had a little light bedtime reading, right?
Correct.
Okay, well, that's good. That's good. Great. So now, and I want to put one more fly in the ointment. In Cosmic Fire, there's a section where those words Manvantara, Mahamanvantara, and Pralaya are used in a completely different manner in terms of time scale. So we sometimes come to the Mahamanvantara or mahakalpa, and we say it's this, 311 trillion. But DK also has other cycles where he cuts the time span down and uses the same words. So, if we want to really go crazy, we can, go off and find those sections which put the whole thing in a state of relativity. When do you use a word like kalpa, mahakalpa, mahamanvantara? How long does it represent? It's not always the same by any means. So he's carried that further in his own writing, not just imported footnotes, in his own writing in A Treatise on Cosmic Fire. Maybe if I remember, I can just find the pages and people can reference them. Look, we're not trying to make chronological scholars out of everybody here. We're just trying to give the sense of participation in vast periods of time. Now, think about this, what we've encountered here, and then think that there are people all over the world who still believe with Bishop Ussher that the universe was created at 9 o'clock in the morning in the year 4004 BC. Okay? That, 6,000 years ago, and none of that, 9 o'clock in the morning, the universe was created by God. And now compare that statement, for which people would fight and die and persecute and attack and burn, and about God doing that, at 9 o'clock in the morning, 6,000 years ago, compare that with the view that we're being offered here, which is not even a complete view by any means. There's loads of approximation, but not fanciful, still approximations. Compare that with the typical Old Testament sort of a Christian estimation of the creation. And then you'll see the difference in the minds of people. There are a lot of flat earthers still walking around now, you know. I hope they don't fall off the edge, but you know, they can pretty well prove that the earth is flat, and all of our astronomical pictures are fakes, and NASA or whatever our space programs are doing a number on us, and they are faking everything that suggests sphericity in the sky. Everything's flat, okay? And that is considered accurate by thousands of people. So, you know, ignorance is a great sin. And in Buddhism, ignorance is like the number one sin. And you can see that those of us who find the secret doctrine and related texts to be of value have a hard sell with many people who consider themselves to be intelligent and having the correct point of view. So, in other words, when you present, it all comes to this, when you present the ageless wisdom, you are up against centuries of rigid prejudices, which are based on childish points of view. And one just has to be ready for that. When you give these kinds of figures to the average religious believer who thinks that the particular teacher of his or her system is the be-all and end-all forever, you know that something has to be destroyed, and you're grateful for the first ray, because it does have to be shattered. Okay, well, thanks, Michael, for those. I would like to know, you know, where to go. I haven't. If you do find any kind of links like that, just let me know, and I'd just like to take a quick look, and maybe other people would also. So it's very helpful. Okay, friends, do you have anything to say or ask or react to or respond to or anything like that?
No one is apparently brave enough to write something in the chat box or raise their hand. We have all of this information from a strictly human perspective in terms of time, but it's going beyond it to talk about duration.
Well, it's Earth. It's an Earth perspective, and you know, it's like the difference between a solar year and a sidereal year. Basically, this is all geocentric. You know, our Earth is the humanity's interpretation of what's going on right here on our Earth is the manner of measurement. It determines how we measure. And like I said before, if you're living on Jupiter, which has a year that's about 12 of ours, you're going to measure differently. And you know, the inclination of the axis will be different, and the gyration will be different, and this nutation will be different. And the rotation will be different, the day will be different. So it's very relative how the beings on a particular planet would measure cosmic time. Now, we have enough on our plate. We cannot look at the Earth as the standard for the universe. But what we can do is use that standard to give ourselves the sense of timing on our planet. Because, we may be going into the age of Aquarius and into a still greater age of Aquarius, and it doesn't at all mean that other planets are going into the same types of ages. It depends on the inclination of their axis and their orientation. They will have different energies that they are accessing now, different from what we are accessing because of the particular orientation of their planet. And ours is different. And what about the solar system itself? There's a sense, I think every 27 days there's a rotation of the sun on its own axis. I think it's something like that. But is the sun having an axis which is straight up and down, as it were, perpendicular to some particular plane, or to the ecliptic? Or is there an inclination? And if there is an inclination, does that determine some kind of age for our entire solar system to which all planets respond? In other words, we may be going into a little age of Aquarius here on Earth, a greater age of Aquarius, but what age, with respect to those constellations, is the whole solar system going through? It's different on every planet, but maybe for the solar system, maybe we're going through a kind of age of Leo, for instance. And how long does it last? It would, and that's where the Tibetan starts talking about a solar mathematics that we cannot touch. We're just not capable. But there are ways to do that. If you have the esoteric inclination, if you have the occult orientation, some of your researches can be directed in that direction. Mostly people, are interested in what's going on way, way out there, apparently out there in the universe, and what new kinds of figures are coming up, and how old the universe is on the basis of how many light years away certain objects appear to be. They're interested in that big picture, but to apply things to our own planet, our own several planets in the solar system, and to our solar system as a whole, those could be significant in terms of timing of the divine plan that the solar logos has for its entire solar system, and for the part to be played by every planetary logos in that larger solar logoic plan. And those are practical things having to do with cycles through which we have to live. So maybe we just get a sense of the vastness of it all. And, Blavatsky pretty much throws up her hands at the end and says, well, what all this means is time past is infinite and time future is infinite. Well, we could agree with that anyway without these figures. But she's basically, maybe she's falling into the trap of saying that infinite is a large number. And Alice Bailey does this too. Infinite is not a large specific number. But it might as well be when you consider how we human beings with our little minds experience years and decades and centuries and lives and ages. It might as well be infinite, you know, is what
Michael,
they're also saying. Yeah.
I would like to welcome Anthony to the meeting. His hand is raised, and Anthony, you can unmute yourself.
Okay.
Yes, hello.
Hi.
Hi. The figures that were provided by Madame Blavatsky in SD, and you made the comment that DK uses them differently in cosmic fire. I was just wondering, when you're speaking to a theosophist, you'll have to sort of calibrate the years rather than speaking with someone who's studying AAB's writings. Would that be correct?
Well, okay, here, in a way, you know, under the law of economy, DK is also giving us Blavatsky's figures, but he's using a method of occult blinding. There are, as far as I can see, there are two methods of occult blinding, using the same term for different things and using a lot of different terms for the same thing. So all I'm saying is that it's obvious that at some point, while not repudiating these figures, DK is saying that certain words associated with these figures can also be used to indicate smaller cycles. That's all I'm saying. It's the same word, but the cycles are different. And he's not repudiating at all what Blavatsky said, otherwise he wouldn't include it. But there are a few pages in there later where you have to kind of scratch your head and say, what kinds of rounds is he talking about using the same terms as he's using, or as is it being used here? Remember that DK gave Blavatsky a lot of information. And of course, Blavatsky did her own research too, apparently. So it's not that what we're talking about here is good only for theosophists. It's good for them and they'll believe it, and we can give it a fair hearing. And it's not that theosophists would necessarily reject what DK is saying later in the book, because he's not excluding the theosophical figures. He's just adding a context in which similar words are used to indicate different kinds of cycles, like the term Maha Manvantara. Okay, so Maha Manvantara is 311 trillion years. Okay, here, but he seems, of course, you know, while the iron is hot, let's see if I can find anything here that might be of interest. Maha Manvantara. Oh my God, there's 36 references. Well, anyway, you know, it starts out with the glossary, basically the great interludes of time between two solar systems. And this is a term frequently applied to great solar cycles. Okay, that's one way of looking at it. And I don't really know right now whether I'm going to be able to find anything else. Mahamanvatara, or Day of Brahma. See what I mean? Mm-hmm. That is, now, think of it. The between two solar systems is not just a day of Brahma. According to the figures we have about an occult century between two solar systems, because we've doubled the figure. So the same term, Mahamanvantara, or maybe mahakalpa at a certain point, are being used for different cycles. At the beginning of a solar cycle, or mahamanvantara, 100 years of Brahma. Well, the one we just looked at didn't say that. We said mahamanvantara, or day of Brahma. So here is reference number 4, and in reference number 5, it makes mahamanvantara a complete solar cycle, or 100 years of Brahma. So all I'm trying to say is that the same term is being used, and it does contribute to some degree of occult blinding for different cycles. And, if we went through the term Mahamanvantara or Mahakalpa, we would find that to be the case. A Manvantara, or day of Brahma, is always of a certain length, and so is a Mahamanvantara. Well, that's nice, except for the fact that we've just seen that they're used differently. So let's just say we could talk to any theosophist about this and just look at major cycles and sub-cycles. Now here, a Mahamanvantara is not a day of Brahma. It's a complete solar cycle. And he's talking Venus lasts throughout the complete solar cycle, which is an occult century. And there's some other places, I could go here and, try to find them, but, there's quite a few references. If I just keep, in another Mahamanvantara and in its 5th period will come the chance for which they have waited. This is a much smaller cycle. Now we're talking about human monads, and we're not talking about another solar system. We're talking about a smaller cycle. And now look here. This is all about the number 5 from page 605. The 5th Mahamanvantara, or solar system, it tells you that we're not just in number 2. The solar logos achieves his 5th major initiation, and that's our particular solar cycle. But he might achieve it in the next one. So here, yes, it looks like solar cycle. The 3 hierarchies are in this Mahamanvantara of profound significance. Maybe that's a solar cycle. Well, in any way, all of these, now we're halfway through the references, and we're talking about Nirvanis returning from the previous solar system, so that is the solar system duration. Where is it? In other words, someplace it's connected with the idea of a round, is all I'm trying to tell you, or all I'm trying to say. Well, I think, unfortunately, I'm going, Here's another one. Why we have only dealt with them from the point of view of a Mahamanvantara and of a Kalpa. So there's some kind of equivalence going on there between the two. And what did we say a Kalpa was? Michael, do you remember? Did we say it was a day of Brahma? What was, not a mahakalpa, was it a year? Was it a day? You recall? Look at this. This is where we get into trouble. There's a period between 2 chains this covers the period of a Maha Manvantara, or 1 year of Brahma. So now we have the term Maha Manvantara, a day of Brahma, a year of Brahma, an occult century of Brahma. And that's what I meant by the method of occult blinding, where we use the same name for different cycles, okay? So a theosophist could understand this if they have the will to understand it and want to understand how DK is writing. Obviously, no one's going to come along and write a book like this unless they have profound knowledge. You look at all the channeled stuff, it's like child's play compared to what DK wrote even in his first book, Initiation Human and Solar. So that was one of the important references where, in other words, we have a term which is used in 3 different ways: a day of Brahma, year of Brahma, occult century of Brahma. And there are other places where this is going on as well. And I wonder, of course, if I get going on the research here, it gets a little bit, I don't know, there's a term. A mahakalpa is a previous solar system, no problem, that's the one we're doing right now. And in the greater mahakalpa, so there's an adjective on page 1203 of Cosmic Fire, which implies that there is a greater mahakalpa, which implies the possibility of a lesser mahakalpa. Okay, well that's, and let's see if there's anything with maha and a dash. Now there are 4 references. Oh, this is just going to be maha. Synthesis is achieved at the end of a greater, no, this is not going to give us what we need. But anyway, the word Mahamanvantara is one of those terms where it's easy to see that it has at least 3 different applications and 3 different cycles for the same word. And if we're going to talk to a theosophist, we'll say DK is not rejecting the terms that Blavatsky is using. As a matter of fact, he's probably really supporting them, but he's also showing some different uses of the word. So I hope that that clarifies the matter just a little bit. And there's other places in the book, I can't go there now, okay? But there's other places where cycles are given names that are the same as in other places, but they're not the same duration. Okay, anything else?
I thank you very kindly for your exhaustive answer. It's very,
Are we
very
there? Am I still audible?
Yes, you are. And it rings true.
Uh-oh.
We can hear you.
Michael, are you there?
Yes. I guess you're not hearing us. Go ahead and speak. We're not hearing you now.
You were speaking?
Yes. It
Low
rings.
system resources may affect your audio quality.
Oh.
Okay, I'm going to unplug and do you hear me now?
Yes, we do hear you.
Do you hear me? Do you hear me now? What's going on?
Yes, Michael, we do hear you. Yes, we do.
Okay, so I'm unplugged.
Okay.
Have you heard anything that I said about
all of it. All of it. And
okay.
It rings true in my way of thinking, in that from the law of correspondence, the lesser and the greater are of similar detail.
Okay, well, you know, as I say, we don't, I think, you know, Mahamanvantara is one of those words, okay? And the term Manvantara is another. And there's a greater Manvantara and obviously lesser Manvantaras. Usually Manvantara means a round. So we also, what I should have done is also look up the word Manvantara rather than just Mahamanvantara. The greater cycle or Manvantara. And yet we have, well, in other words, if I pursued that according to this law of analogy or correspondences that we've been talking about, then we would find the same phenomena going on. And we're in something called the fourth Manvantara at this point, and maybe that's the solar systemic term, and there's also a planetary term. But sometimes he's a little vague, okay? So remember that he called a Manvantara a day of Brahma, but he also called a Mahamanvantara a day of Brahma. And that's problematic. But still understandable. Okay, here's a Manvantara as a day of Brahma, and so forth. The etheric body of the solar system is now complete, though it will not be perfected until the end of another Manvantara. So let's see if there's anything here that gives us some kind of final confirmation. Now we have a solar application of the word, because the failures of the previous solar system are the failures of a previous Manvantara, which is oftentimes called a Mahamanvantara. So DK, he knows what he's doing here when he uses a term for multiple types of cycles. And here it is again, Manvantara is equaling the whole solar system of incarnation of a solar system, not just a day. Anyway, I guess I'm now here. This is interesting. He calls it a planetary Manvantara. So there's probably solar Manvantaras too, as we have seen. All right, I think the point is made that we can talk to a theosophist and we can prove that DK does not repudiate Blavatsky's listing of a certain type of chronology with vast figures, but that the same terms can also be used in different contexts. And that's the only point. And it's all, you know, justifiable in a way according to the law of correspondences. Okay, is there anything else, Michael? I think we're there.
No one else has raised their hands or written in the chat box.
Okay, that's the final word. And if I can find, you know...
Whoops. Anna has just written, all cycles are the fractals of three divine aspects, cosmic fires, vibrational motion, which is enfolding and unfolding by the pattern of octaves, where the fifth and third note link the first and the seventh into one accord. The same is our centers.
Okay, well that's a profound idea and would have to be now investigated from the harmonic language. Basically, we have in an octave, well, I'm not going to go too far here. We have in an octave 8 notes and 7 differentiated notes until we get the comparison of 2 to 1 at the higher note of the octave. So in the very beginning of Letters on Occult Meditation, he deals with this. He gives you the chord of the monad, and the fundamental note of matter and the note of the monad are in a relationship of 2 to 1. They are the same note, but at a higher frequency. So if the 3rd and 5th note, you say, are linking the 1st and 7th note, we'd have to try now to get specific about what kind of harmonics we're dealing with. But in general, the thing to walk away with is the fact that the universe is a musical demonstration, and there is a musical key to the secret doctrine. And when you really examine the technical harmonists, they are very, very exacting in their work. And it also gives you a hint as to why the 4th ray is called the ray of mathematical exactitude. So read what Anna said one more time, please.
She wrote, all cycles are the fractals of 3 divine aspects, cosmic fires, vibrational motion, which is enfolding and unfolding by the pattern of octaves, where the 5th and 3rd note link the 1st and the 7th into one accord.
Yeah, and here I'm going to make another suggestion, that we can work with octaves as the main organizing principle, or we can derive all notes through the ascension of perfect fifths. In which case, for instance, in music, let's say we start with middle C at a rate of about 260 cycles per second. We would ascend in a way that does not touch the octave until the end of the whole range. We would go this way. C. Here, I'm going to write it. Maybe, I'll write it right here, because otherwise it's going to be impossible to see. Okay, C, D, no, sorry, C, G, D, A, E, B, F sharp. Whoop. Uh-oh. Here is, yeah, okay, F sharp, C sharp. Whoop. Maybe I'm taking too long here, I'm afraid. C. Yeah, here it is. C and a sharp. I could use flats, but that's a whole nother thing. And now, let's see if I can get back to where I started from. That's my point, right? G sharp. I'm just using the sharps. D sharp. A sharp. Am I right so far? Let's see. E, B, F sharp.
After A is E and then B.
Yeah, let's just see if I'm correct here. This is A sharp is really like B flat, right? So
Yes.
So basically, let's see. That's not exactly. Hold on. No, it's F. It's F again, isn't it? Aha, and this is not correct. E, B, no, F sharp. Ah, this is just plain F. And then here we are, we've returned. That is ascent by the cycle of fifths. So it's an organizing principle in music. I think, Pythagoras was using something similar where we're not organizing strictly by octaves, but at length, after running through so many fifths, we do come back to the starting point quite at a frequency which is not 2 to 1, but which is in that kind of series. So, 2 to 1 and maybe 4 to 1 and 8 to 1, I'd have to work that out, but you start out at a relatively low C, let's say, and you wind up at a multiple at a much higher C, but it is related in the octave ratio. You would get there anyway by octaves. And here's the way of getting there via the organization of the perfect fifth. And of course, then we'd have to deal with flats and all of that. Just another way to deal with this. So, but the takeaway on all this is that all of us have a chord, which is part of a phrase, which is part of a movement, which is part of a sonata or a symphony. And we are integral parts of the creative composition, either of our planetary logos, which is called a symphony, or of our solar logos, which is called a sonata. And we all have our place in terms of how we tune up our particular chord in the phrase. So the universe is musical, in short. And the interval of the octave represents the monad, the interval of the fifth represents the soul. Okay, is there anything else?
That's all that has been written, and no hands raised, and we are, let's see,
better escape.
We're about 15 minutes after 2 hours.
Oh my goodness, how did that happen?
It's all relative.
Yes, I believe it's all relatives. That's what I say to my family. It's all relatives. Okay, friends, the great invocation. And I'll tell you what, if you have 3 minutes, just sit down with yourself and just think of years and cycles and duration, and then contrast that with the idea of timelessness, eternal duration. Because all these figures, as long as they seem, are just a blip on the supercosmic screen. Okay. From the point of
Michael,
light. Whoop.
do you want to switch your screen to the great invocation?
Good idea, good idea. We should know it by heart, but obviously, I've missed out on a verse or two, and I don't think I'm alone. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men. Let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. Okay, everybody, thank you. Tomorrow evening, well, tonight, this evening, we'll have the glamour work. And I hope by now that you have the ongoing link for it. It's on GoToMeeting or GoToWebinar. And then on Saturday, we'll have Destiny of the Nations and the Soul of Nations in the evening, and then on Sunday we'll have Attracting Financial Resources for the work on Sunday. So Saturday is the Destiny of the Nations in the evening, here in Europe anyway, and Sunday accounts for the Attracting Money for Hierarchical Purposes also in the evening. And our full moon period is approaching, so we'll be letting you know about that. And as soon as Tuya and I can decide if you wish to be a part of the Esoteric United Nations initiative, we'll arrange a session in which you can make your commitment to the ongoing process. It's nothing drastic, it's just kind of a promise to stay with it. Okay.
And regarding the Esoteric United Nations,
Yeah.
we did have a meeting and several people had indicated their wish to become part of that initiative. If anyone else wants to do that, let me and or Tuya know so that I can get the word out.
Yeah, I think, yeah, especially make sure that you're included from your normal email address, right, Michael? Lightbearer137@gmail.com.
That is correct.
Yeah, you can include me too, infinitize8@gmail.com. Tuya is very busy right now, but we'll make sure that the information gets to her. Thank you. And so, Michael, you'll end the meeting for us?
Yes, I will.
Okay.
Thank you, Michael. Love and
Thank you.
blessings to everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.